Hey guys, back to the Storm Runner. We're on chapter 31. See how it goes now. Whew. The sea's starting to pick up, so we know they're going to be getting to that other world really soon. Brooks and I lie on opposite ends of the bench, with only our feet touching. I gave her the most of the blankets as the whole winds kicked up, speeding the currents. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep, where I dreamed of strange metal forests, like before. But this time, there was no Rosie, only Miss Cab as a chicken, the size of a rhinoceros, hollering, "Find his blind spot." Our pooch doesn't have a blind spot, I yelled. Then I felt relieved to see her. She was my link to home. How's my mom? Your mom? You're worried about her? When every day I'm becoming more of a chicken? Today I craved birdseed, Zane. Birdseed, you must hurry. I get it, but I need to know, is she okay? With an annoyed cluck, Miss Cab said, "If you must know, that fool Ortiz has us under constant surveillance. And when I'm no longer a chicken, I swear I'll..." She let her pending threat die on her chicken lips. Good. The three of them were safe and sound. Now, back to old Puke, I said. Unless you have some secret up your sleeve, your badgering me in my dreams isn't exactly helping. And it really hurts when you jammed your beak into my hand. Yes, well, you deserve that. I agree that my dreams aren't the best way to communicate. Only some of my words are reaching you, and it's quite maddening. But it's all we have. So, what do I do once I'm in the old world? Kill him. Great idea. Zane, I'm a chicken. My legs are chicken legs. My eyes are chicken eyes. My brain, well, you get the point. I'm not exactly, did I mention I'm a chicken? And you know who sings out to the tune of me every single day. I hope I'd made it back to tell Mr. Ortiz that La Muerta was as powerful as he dreamed. He'd be so excited and rosy. I asked hopefully, "Any word from your friends? Do I look like your secretary?" The metal tree shimmered with a warped image I couldn't make out. Then Miss Cab squawked, "Time to wake up. Remember the blind spot, Zane. Find it." There was a terrible explosion, and the cloud of smoke filled the air. I jerked awake, hacking up my lungs. Brooks pulled the blanket over her head and jammed her foot against my leg. "Sorry," I murmured, sitting up. Thankfully, the explosion had only been in my dreams. The smoke had been replaced with fog, thick. It swallowed the sea and the horizon. The sky above were palish, grayish blue. It was impossible to tell for sure, but I guessed the sun was rising. Jazz rushed down from the second deck. "We've made incredible time. See? I told you this boat was amazing." "Are we close?" I asked, lowering my voice to avoid another kick from Brooks. "We're here. This is the old world?" That got Brooks up. Her hair was tangled in knots, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Jazz snorted. "No, this is the entrance." Blinking, I looked around, trying to see through the mist. Where? I half expected to see a door or a gate. Brooks was on her knees, peering over the railing. "I don't see anything." The boat lurched and stopped suddenly, like a stone wall was blocking our way. Slowly, the fog separated and curled into ribbons, creating an image. I held my breath, watching as it took shape. Sleeping eyes, a nose, and a mouth. It looked like an enormous face. "Holy K!" Brooks cried. "What is that?" "How do we get through?" I asked. Jazz grunted. "The mouth, of course." "Do we need some kind of magic words or something?" Brooks said, "to get it open?" Jazz frowned. Then they looked at us with a frantic eye. "Give me something that belongs to each of you. Something with some weight." There wasn't time for questions. Brooks yanked off her boot, muttering something about her freezing fist, and thrust it at him. Jazz turned it over in his hand. "It's all I could think of," Brooks said, "unless you want a dirty sock." I looked around, grabbed my stupid cane off the bench, and handed it to him. "You think this is going to open for a combat boot and a cane?" Jazz launched Brooks's boot into the face. Nothing happened. "Just like I suspected," he mumbled. The fog began to curl again, and the face started to disappear. Blood for the gods, open. He launched my cane, smacking the face on the nose. Slowly, the mouth opened. A huge yawn that revealed a total darkness inside. You sure this is a good idea? I asked. You want to get to the old world or not? Jazz rushed up the stairs to get the boat in gear. We sailed into the mouth slightly until we were covered in total darkness. Jazz, that was Brooks. He drew up in his sharp breath. I'm here, kid. As my eyes adjusted, I said, this is the gateway? My voice echoed like we were in a tunnel, very cold tunnel that smelled like rotting roadkill. Brooks wrinkled her nose and covered her mouth with her hand. The smell was sickening, like the dairy farm back home, but mixed with raw chicken decaying in the sun. Then I saw why in the dark waters below were bizarre-looking eyeless fish, as long as the bull sharks and bloated as a puffer fish. That their pale flesh looked half-eaten, and chunks fell off. They slithered through the dark. Whitish foam curled on the water surface. Brooks' eyes were wide, trying to cut through the dark. What do you see, Zane? Looks like a tunnel. I leaned over the railing. We were surrounded by rust, corroded metal walls, or the hull of a shipwreck. The space was so narrow, I could have reached out and touched the walls if I wanted to, which I didn't. Creaks and groans echoed through the cold space. Why is this so awful? I asked, trying to make tiny breaths to avoid the rotten smell. Hasn't been kept up, Jazz said, flickering on the flashlight. It looked a lot like the burning flesh kind Brooks had lost in the volcano. When the new gateways were built, these were forgotten. Death has a way of infesting whatever it touches. I looked up at Jazz. He was frowning, scanning me like I was some kind of lab rat. Maybe he'd like to switch on the red beam and burn me up. What's wrong? Brooks said. Her face was half hidden in the shadows. When I got the letter, Jazz began slowly, I thought there'd been a mistake. Then I got suspicious. Why would someone ask me to take them to the old world? A place of gods. What are you talking about, Jazz, Brooke asked. He began to hum a stupid song. The days are a-comin', and a terrible uneasiness rose inside of me. Only gods can open old gateways, he said. I'm not a god, and Little Hawk, you're not. So that leaves two others on board. And something tells me it isn't El Lanchero downstairs. I opened my mouth trying to say something. What I didn't know. Brooke shot a look at me, and Jazz continued to unravel the secrets. Your cane, he said. That's what opened the gate. How does a cane open an ancient gateway? I asked flippantly, hoping Jazz might hear how crazy it sounded. By belonging here, Jazz said. By belonging to a god. I didn't like the way he was considering me with one of his eyes. This had gotten out of hand. There were too many clues and signs pointing to me as a godborn, and I knew if it was only a matter of time before everyone figured it out. I had to get to El Pooch, and I had to get there fast. A flash of movement in the water caught my attention. Slowly, like it didn't want us to notice, the dark waters began to rise. The foam bubbles and steamed. Jazz looked over my shoulder at him. So, he said, still stuck on me having the power to open the gateway? What do you have to say for yourself? You some kind of god in disguise? What kind of games are you playing? I can't talk up. Can we talk about this later? Because right now we've got a problem. Problem? Looks like the water's rising, I said more calmly than I felt. Jazz's eyebrows shot up. He rushed to the boat railing, aimed the light, and scanned the sea below. Shadows casted by the pale, eyeless fish dotted right under the surface. Then he mumbled a few curse words and said, it's even worse than that. Someone's trying to shut the gateway. Jazz jerked off his vest. We gotta get out. Get out, Brooks said. How much farther do we have to go? Is there an emergency exit? I hoped. Just a few feet, Jazz barked. A few lousy feet. I didn't have time to guess who was closing the gateway. Puke face blasted tracker. I should have carved it out of my skin. I'd been stupid enough to believe that he'd been too busy tormenting the twins to care about me. Jazz scrambled up to the deck, shifted the gears hard on the boat, groaned in protest. The engine sputtered. Come on, move, he yelled. I felt helpless. The water continued to rise. I heard the sounds of the rust gears grinding as the walls kept closing in. The air was so thick it felt like it was trying to choke us all. Zane, Brooks hollered, do something. I gave her a panic but blank look. Like what? You're the son of, she threw her hands in the air and shouted, I don't know, like anything. I leaned over the edge, willing the water to stay in place. Matt had only traced his hands through the water to get it to do as he commanded. Instinctively, I raised my hand. Stay. Okay, lame choice of words. I mean, I wasn't commanding a dog, but it was all I could think of. The waters kept rising, rising and rising and rising. My body stiffened. Jazz cursed up the storm. Jazz cursed up a storm as he rushed below deck and returned with an inflatable rat. Boat's too big to get through. It's gonna get crushed like a sardine can. He was right. In 1 minute or so, the crushing would begin. Jazz rised to the raft with his mouth and started blowing. Fortunately, a giant's lungs are big enough to inflate 4-person Dingy in 15 seconds. No way I'm getting in that, Brooks said to Jazz. Those monsters will eat right through this. They only eat flesh, Jazz argued, rubbing his chin. Don't think they like rubber. Oh, I said with a casual shrug. Well, that makes a sure option. My wrist began to burn like hot was dripping onto my skin. I didn't want to look down. Somehow I knew in a second I did. Everything would change. Drip, drip, drip. Clenching my jaw, I glanced at Al Pooch's mark. The eyes beneath the eyelids moved back and forth. And wildly, impatiently, slowly and painful, my skin began to tear as an invisible razor was slicing it open. I bit back a scream, watching in terror. The eyelids opened. This wasn't just a tattoo. These were real eyes, black eyes that could see. Now, I did scream. A line of blood snake drowned down my arm. What is it? Brooks' voice shook. A deep, dark laugh echoed from the walls. Al Pooch! I shouted so loud that the walls vibrated. You're a coward. Where's your father now? His voice was steady as a thin trail of black mist rose from the slit in my wrist and encircled me. Zane! Brooks' wild eyes took me in. I could tell she couldn't hear the death of God of Death. Anger was climbing up my throat now, fast and furious. It burned like lava. Guys, Jazz called from the front of the boat, where he had already loaded Hondo. Get in, I hurried, tugging Brooks along, making sure she got into the life raft. She looked back, reaching for my hand, but I had already stepped away. Her eyes glowed. Zane! Let them go, Al Pooch. It's me you want. I gripped the railing. The corroded walls continued to press in. Zane! Brooks shouted again. She was trying to scramble back aboard the boat, but Jazz took a hold of her. She kicked, she squirmed. Let me go! The dark laugh bounced off the walls. Al Pooch was enjoying this. The albino fish monsters began to glow beneath the dark waters, casting a putrid yellow light into the tunnel. I glanced down on the eyes of my wrist. They were staring up at me. Gods can be in more than one place at a time, Matt had said, and I finally understood. Al Pooch could see me, knew my every move, but not because of some tracking device. These eyes, his eyes, had become a part of me. I gagged. We're not going without Zane. Brooks had managed to get free and Jazz was climbing back onto the boat, which the walls were still crushing. Why is she so stubborn? More screeching, grinding, metal on metal. Water splashed over the sides, the foam pooled on the deck. The monsters below, their massive jaws ready to devour whatever flesh came their way. Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. Out of the corner of my eyes, I could see Brooks coming towards me with an awkward stride as the boat was tipping dangerously. I dropped to my knees. I knew what I had to do. Brooks was gripping the railing, getting closer. Stay back, I hollered at her. But I knew it was useless. She never listened. You're strong, Godborn, Al Pooch hissed, but not strong enough. Then an idea struck me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the jade. Whoever gives it away can give it with any power. With an outstretched arms, I tried passing it to Brooks to give her some kind of control over the water so we could all get away. Take it, I shouted, her eyes fixed at it. I could tell she understood. She lunged, her free hand extended. Our fingers met. The boats lurched forward, forcing me to lose my grip on the stone. It skittered down the deck, pivoting like a tornado. Brooks went for the jade, but she didn't have enough light to find it. It was gone. The shadow sea crept up higher and higher, like sharks that could smell blood. The monsters gathered with eyes and mouths. I called Brooks over my shoulder. Pull me out when I tell you to, okay? Pull. What are you talking about? Just be fast, I hollered. And then to Alpooch, I said, you want me? Then come and get me. And I plunged my wrist into the hungry waters. Oh boy, it's getting intense now. Chapter 32. It was worse than I ever imagined, like acid burning through my skin. The screams that tore through the tunnel weren't mine. At first, they belonged to the god of death. But it wasn't long before my screams joined his as the monsters ate away at his eyes in my flesh. Brooks grabbed my other arm and pulled me away from the water. I fell back, crashing against the deck. I heard a heavy footfalls. Jazz had returned to the boat. The tunnel walls had stopped closing in. I gasped, shivering uncontrollably. I was in shock, terrible, numbing shock. Brooks's voice was coming at me like she was underwater. Zane, what did you do? Zane, this, Zane, that, Zane. At the edge of my mind, I remembered thrusting my arm into the water. I could still feel the monster's sharp teeth. I looked at Brooks. Her dark hair spilled around her worried face. Get me a rag for his arms, she said. There was sudden sound of the rushing water. Our poor, crunching boats pitched forward with a groan. Soon it felt like we were cruising down the river. The rotten smell had disappeared, which told me we weren't in the tunnel anymore. But the darkness hadn't let go. My breath evened out. My eyes focused. Terrified of the damage I might see, I squinted at my wound. The skin was raw and bleeding, like the time I had fallen off the back of Hondo's truck and scraped my knees against the hot asphalt. From what I could tell, at least some of Alpooch's mark was gone. I hope those eyes were history. Jazz shone his flashlight on me while Brooks shoved a rag into my hand to hold against my wrist. She cursed me under her breath while she prepared the bandage. Jazz had found some gauze in the boat's first aid kit, but it must have been for giants because it was huge. She tore a strip with her teeth. You saved us. That was Hondo. Hondo, I turned to see him kneeling next to me, smirking across the mouth. You're the crazy, stupid, brave kid. I grabbed hold of him, pulled myself into his sitting position, and hugged him with all my strength. I had left. I'm sorry, I whispered. Sure, my flesh eating might have been dinner for some creepy fish, but I couldn't imagine the pain he had gone through. Other than dark shadows under his eyes, he looked okay. But that's not to worry me most about him. Sometimes the bruising on the inside is what gets you the worst. Brooks gently took my hold of my arm and began wrapping it, first with gauze, then with strips of silk lining she had torn from Jazz's purple vest. It was exactly a cool bandage because the fabric had tiny pink flowers printed all over it. Not so tight, I flinched. She definitely should have never be a nurse. Then I put my hand over hers and made her look at me. It was my fault, I muttered, because I knew she was blaming herself for the lost jade. She brushed away a tear and opened up her mouth, but said nothing. You're one hell of a hero. Running Alpooch off like that? Jazz clapped me on the back, and I wondered if he had meant to do that, as put as much muscle into it, or maybe it was payback for lying to him. You saved our lives. But there wasn't a time to celebrate. The real battle hadn't even started, and without a jade, I had nothing to help me. Jazz tried to start up with me. So, you're a godborn, eh? Can we talk about it later? Brooke shot him a glare and helped him to his feet. You're okay. Other than the pink flowers? Zane? Yeah, I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. Satisfied I wasn't bleeding out, she snapped, You could have lost your arm, you idiot. What were you thinking? I had to take his eyes out. He could easily see me, see every move before I made it. Hondo gave a short nod of approval. You attacked his weakness. But seriously, dude, that was pretty gross. So I found the first soft spot, Puke's overconfidence and underestimation of me. And I landed a blow. I had to admit, I felt pretty proud of myself, despite the fact that I was going to have a killer scar, reminding me of this terrible burning pain from those evil little fish with razor teeth. They had only removed half of Al Pooch's mark, and now it looked like a regular eyeless skull. But at least he couldn't see me anymore. I went to stand, and that's when I saw my flattened backpack. It must have fallen on top of it. Quickly, I unzipped it and rooted around for Miss Cab's eyes. I didn't have to pull the baggie out to know. I could feel the mush. I'd smashed her eyeballs. She was definitely going to kill me. Al Pooch didn't do the honors first. A boat pitched. A dim light flickered up ahead. Inch by inch, we floated towards it until the tunnel disappeared entirely. Whoa! Hondo turned in slow circles, taking in the gray jungle around us. Brooks drew into short breaths, leaning over the boat's edge. Broad trees stretched towards the cloudless sky. Their branches, drooping with weight of the spider webs, were still choking the life from them. It was a strange world, dull like all colors had been drained from it. The trees, the skies, the earth were all different shades of gray. Other than the dried leaves rustling and the slow breeze, the place was silent as an old graveyard. It's eerie, I said, not sure what I was expecting. The old world, Jazz repeated, is awestruck, as it needed to be named. Yeah, emphasis on old, as in 1 foot in the grave. Hondo grimaced. Place looks dead. Not dead, Jazz slid, asleep. It's been an eternal night here since the gods abandoned it. 2 small moons inch across the sky in perfect synchronicity. Hang on, I said, Al Pooch, until he gave me the 3rd moon. But the moons here are always present. Maybe he meant in our time zone, Hondo said. Brooks blew a stray curl from her face. Puke doesn't care about time zones. All he cares about is winning. Good point, Zane. If the moons here never disappeared, he could essentially show up any second. How could she be so calm about this? Pukeface had told me he needed to take care of a few things. I'd hoped that meant things in our world. How do we know what time it is here? I asked Jazz so I could figure out the time back home. Jazz smacked his forehead and rolled his eyes. Time here? Kid, you've got a lot to learn. Time isn't marked in the old world. He glanced at his watch on his wrist. Lucky for you, my watch keeps real time world. Even when I'm here, it's still morning in Cali. So I almost have a whole day left. Hopefully. I started breathing again. Hondo craned his neck to see Jazz's massive silver watch with a dozen dials and buttons. I know a few things about marketing, he said to the giant. Maybe we could become partners. Then again, I guess your watch probably wouldn't be that popular considering no one comes here, he added with a shrug. But the other stuff, like the scooter, totally awesome. Super turbo Jazz. Jazz grunted. I've got a lot of inventions. Some didn't turn out too well, like the dog collars that was supposed to make dogs fly, ended up burning off their fur instead. I got sued over that one, lost half my life savings. Guys, Brooks interrupted. Focus. The boat bumped up against the embankment and crumbled into stone, where the river ended. Time to disembark, Jazz said cheerfully. But there was nothing cheerful about this sleeping gray place, only the feeling of dread. And the first thought that crept into my head, I don't want to die here. Jazz shrugged his shoulders, a huge pack, and stepped off the boat. We all followed, adjusting his eye path. He turned to Brooks. Is now a good time, little hawk? He was asking for permission to interrogate me. So I cut him off at the pass. Yes, I'm a godborn, I said. There's no point in trying to hide it now. It was like the boat with a leak on the bottom. Pretty soon it will fill with water and sink. You can't tell anyone, Jazz, Brooks said, hoisting her bag over her shoulder. Jazz looked offended. You know, giants are the best secret keepers, next to Sears, that is. Then he narrowed his eyes and inched closer to me. Wait a second. If you're God, oh no. He figured it out and looked like he was going to blow. Whatever was sleeping here was about to wake up. He clenched his bull-sized fist. You're the one who set this massacrosity, bloodthirsty monster free. Hondo stopped between me and the giant, craning his neck to look up at Jazz. Hang on, he argued. He didn't have a choice. I mean, he did, but not really. Give the kid a break. Jazz began to shake. A fat green vein throbbed in his neck. Brooks rushed over with a chocolate drink from her pack, which he guzzled, leaving dribbles down his chin. He did it to save me, Brooks said pleadingly. I would have died if Zane didn't let him out. Jazz's gray eyes rose over me, and Brooks like he was trying to connect more dots. How long would it take for the gods to do the same? The gods will kill you when they find out, he finally said. No way they would let another godborn live. Then he let out a loud burp that reeked of onion and dust. Yeah, so I've heard, I said, but I need to stay alive long enough to kill Alpooch. I'd worry about the gods after that, if there is an after. You, Jazz smirked. A skinny kid with a limp, I finished sentence. I was going to be a lopsided head, but okay. Jazz snapped off a branch trait and handed it to me. I guess it was supposed to be a walking stick. Best to leave the god kid, he went on. They've got a lot more experience with this sort of thing. He's a god, Hondo argued, and a hell of a fighter. He can take down the demon runners in his sleep. I love my uncle, but he wasn't helping my case. Jazz didn't look convinced. Demon runners are shadows of the guards with none of their magic or power, said the giant. In fact, we don't know enough about your brand of god-born blood, what it's capable of or not. He wiped some chocolate off his chin and licked his fingers. That's the whole reason for the sacred oath, to keep things balanced and orderly. Unless you've got some god powers greater than God, you need to step aside. It has to be him, Jazz. Brooks insisted, tugging her off the single boot. We can't let anyone else get to Alpooch. I hear an or less in there, Little Hawk, or else I die, I said. Or else he becomes a soldier of death, Brooks added, tossing her boot away. Death would be much better than that. Jazz shrugged like he was used to hearing this sort of thing all the time. Whatever. You want to get yourself killed? Be my guest. But don't drag Little Hawk into this any more than you already have, he said. Then his eyes lit up as if something important had occurred to him. So that's it? What? I said. What's it? Your dad, Jazz began. Whoever he is, he stuck his fingers in his ears. Don't tell me. The less I know, the better. I want you to lure Alpooch to this place because he knew that the gods wouldn't look here. Not at first, anyways. He brought you time to the deed yourself before the heavens descend on you like vultures. Not sure if that means he likes you or hates you, but I guess you could look either way. You sure gods won't come here? I asked. Not sure whether that made me feel better or worse. Jazz started down the shadowy path. Look around, kid. No one's been here in eons. Hondo's eyes across the paled world. Not exactly a dream destination, he said. Then I really need to change out of these threads. But can I keep the suit? Jazz smirked. I figured it was as safe to ask him about the spark striker then. Lightning pounder, he said. Yeah, I've heard of it, lightning pounder. That's sort of violent. She strikes lightning into the seers, giving them powers. She's all women's libs. Trains girls, orphans, who have nowhere else to go. Stuff like that. Don't you know your old man would want with her? I mean, unless he wants her to train you, which there isn't time for that. Right, I said, feeling stupidly small. Why would Hurricane send me to this ancient lightning pounder who trains orphan girls? Last time I checked, I wasn't an orphan or a girl. What if the lightning pounder couldn't help me? Jazz grunted. Let's move on, kid. You've got a god to kill. End of chapter 32.